long has it been since my last video? I mean, jeez, feels like it's been like 5 years. I mean, get your stuff together, man. I'm back with a new review. It is with Jeff Nippard's Essentials program. This is now what, my 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th program of his that I've now reviewed. I don't know. He kind of just keeps making them. So therefore my reviews are gonna keep coming with them. And as expected, hey, it's a Jeff Nippard program. It's good. Spoiler alert, all right? At the end of the day, that's pretty much all we need to really say because, yeah, it's good. You know, it's expected. So I'm giving it a score of 14.95789726 out of 10 because it is fantastic, it is marvelous, and that's all you really do need to know. That's the video for today. See you next week.
Gotcha.
I'm just kidding. All right, yes, we gotta do an actual review. So we will, in fact, do that. And to start with, yes, as I said, and I wasn't actually lying.
It's real.
It is actually a very good program. So getting into this is, like I said, his Essentials program, okay? It is tailored towards those who are looking for a shorter version. I can't. Hello. It is tailored for those looking for a shorter version of a program, essentially, for those who can only work out for really at most 45 minutes per day. And he actually gives you multiple options for when you go to buy the program. So it gives you 2 day, 3 times a day, 3 times a week, 4 days, 5 days. So you can pick from one of those. Now, if you pre-order, you actually are given all 4 of those versions, like I was. Why am I having such a hard time speaking today? I don't know why. I am gonna go over actually 2 of those versions. So the 4 times a week one and then the 2 times a week one, because I feel like those are probably the most common one that people are going to select based on the way this program is and what people are looking for. That's just an estimate. And if you pre-ordered this, then you're given all 4. But if you did not, if you didn't buy it already, then you need to choose carefully. And in short, the one to know to go with is the one that you know you can stick with most consistently, okay? So don't select the one that's 5 days a week thinking, yeah, I wanna work out 5 days a week, and then find out you can only do 3 times a week on one particular week, and then you can only do 4, and then it flip-flops all around. The one you know you can do from week to week to week and consistently stick with. Go with that one. So if you know for sure it's only 2, go with that one. If you can get in only 3, go with that one, okay? And at the end of the day, it's not really that necessary to go with the 5-day option, okay? There's nothing wrong with it, don't get me wrong. It's good programming, perfectly fine, okay? But don't think that you need to go with that top option even if you can consistently commit to it, okay? Because you can still get pretty much equal and just as good results with the 4-day or even 3-day one, or even the 2-day one, depending on how hard you work, okay? It all comes down to the programming and really that intensity. And the intensity is very, very important that I'm gonna talk about in a second, okay? But anyway, before we get into the programs themselves, as with all Jeff Nippard's programs, it comes with a booklet with explanations about the program, about the principles, the structures, all that good stuff. Now, it's not as detailed as his previous programs, okay? And it's by design. It doesn't need to be, okay? It's Essentials program. This is giving you essentially what you need to have a good program, to get it in quickly because you don't have a ton of time to do it, and to understand the basic concepts to know what you're doing, okay? That's really what it's tailored towards and exactly what he delivers. All right, so in the beginning here, he gives you a little section on what the Essential program is for, or who it's for, and what the program is all about. You know, again, just real brief explanation for it, perfectly fine. All right, and like I said, what this program isn't, all right, which is essentially for those who are really advanced and looking for workouts that are an hour to an hour and a half, or even up to 2 hours long, who can give in not only a ton of intensity, but a ton of volume in the process, okay? It's for those who are looking to get in the essentials, what they basically can in a short period of time while still making good progress. Now, one key thing to mention here is that, yes, with the way the programming is, you absolutely can make good progress on this. Okay, now having said that, are you gonna make the best amount of progress you can in a program? No, and that's not what this program is meant about, and that's exactly what Jeff talks about as well. He never claims you're gonna get just as good results as his other programs, okay? You're not. It's still gonna give you good progress, okay, but don't expect miracles from this, okay, either, right? That's a very important thing. If you want an excellent program that's going to give you tons and tons of progress, you need to up the volume and you need to up the amount of time you're spending in the gym. That's just a factor, okay? This program isn't for those who are truly actually advanced. It's more towards, I would say, those who are intermediate to beginners. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that those who are advanced can't do this program, because you absolutely can. It can be actually an excellent bridge between a program that you're kind of taking a break from into another form of program or another mesocycle or something like that. So you want to back off for a little bit, you want to get in some good progress, or just basically maintain where you are for a bit while pushing yourself at a later time. This can be an excellent way to do it. Now, after that little explanation, he then goes into his basic FAQs, kind of similar to what he did before, and some key questions that he does answer here, which is 1 to 2 sets per exercise really enough? And if you look at the program, which I'll show in a bit, most of the exercises really are just 1 working set or 2 working sets at most. There are a few exercises here or there. It's more towards that 4 or 5 day program that you're getting 3 working sets in 1 or 2 of those exercises. But for the most part, you're working on 2 or just 1 working set. Now, having said that, because of the way it's programmed, yes, it is enough. It's concentrating solely on, or not solely, but heavily on intensity, not so much volume. And the way he does it is exactly the way that you need to, and I'll go over that in just a second. So anything that you need answered should be here. You can always reach out to him for any others that aren't answered, or if you want to comment down below asking some specific questions about it, I will do my best to answer it for you as well. Okay, so you have that good FAQ followed by a warm-up. Okay, the warm-up is like you get in his other programs, an excellent warm-up. You can certainly follow this. Again, one thing he does note, and I will mention here as well, is that any warm-up you do will add on to time that you do for this total workout. Okay, so if you really are crunched for time for that 45 minutes, you're not going to be doing a 10 or 15-minute warm-up. Okay, because then you're going to end up missing out on the main part of that program. Warm-up is certainly important. Add in what you can, okay? But it's not the biggest deal in the world if you have to skip out on some parts of this warm-up. Just get some key blood flowing in there to begin with, and you'll be just fine. Now, this next section, like I mentioned, is one I'm very happy with, the exercise substitutions. Now, in his other programs, it was simply just a list, okay? You have this one particular exercise, here's a couple different ones you can do instead. Now, this time around, he actually does provide a little bit of explanations, and I don't know if I want to take a little bit of credit for this, but he's kind of has commented in the past, both him and his assistant who helps design his programs, about this exercise substitutions. They're going to pay attention a little bit more to that. So yeah, maybe I'm going to take a little credit here. I don't know. But anyway, it's still, either way, no matter what, it's a nice thing to see, okay? So he gives you some ideas of when you should be doing those substitutions, basically depending on what you have available at the gym. You simply prefer one exercise over the other because you know what works best for you. That's most important. And a couple other factors. Now, having said all that, I think there's 1 or 2 other things he could have mentioned here, which is if you have a certain injury or limitation. Okay, because that's another factor when it comes to exercise substitutions. There's one exercise you may not be able to do simply because you have some kind of limitation or injury, and therefore you need to do something else. As long as it adheres to or is in line with the overall program, okay, the principles of that program, that's very important, okay? Again, that's something Jeff here mentions. Just keep that in mind, okay? But that's another thing I think he could have included here in that substitution explanations. But either way, guys, excellent thing to see here, okay? And he doesn't give you a huge list either like he does in the other programs, okay? Again, it's essentials, what you need. He only gives you 2 options for each exercise you can then substitute. And instead of giving you in a list, he puts it directly in the program itself. So you can see exactly in that area what you can substitute it with. And it's very easy to see. And you don't have to substitute it out either. It just gives you good options. Now, after that, it does go on to the program itself. Before we get into that though, after the program, he does cover some basic stuff I'll just mention here, which is the overall principles of the program. So like RPE, what that is, because that is something he puts in pretty much every program he has. So a nice little explanation there. And this time around, he actually ties it in with RIR, reps in reserve. So essentially saying that, and this is basically, the thing that you have an RPE, let's say, of 8, that's an RIR of 2, so you have 2 reps left in reserve, or 2 reps left in the tank at the end of your set. An RPE of 9 is essentially an RIR of 1, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is a good way to help you determine what weight you should be using. Okay, now you're gonna be going heavy in almost every exercise by design in this program, okay? Because you have to, because you're much less volume. You have much less volume in this case. So you need to up something to make up for that lack of volume, which is effort or intensity. And the way to do that is increasing the load overall. So almost every exercise here is in an RPE of 8, 9, or even 10, okay? Depending on what that particular exercise is. Not anything lower than that, because then it kind of defeats the purpose. It's not going to be enough intensity, and you're not going to make enough effort or enough progress, over just one working set, okay? That is the key to this program, which I'll cover in just a second. But he also covers in this section here some basic principles, like I said, like an anatomy section, some basics there that you need to know, and a few other explanations, okay? So very similar to other things, okay? So like I said, it's not as much detail as his other programs, but that's by design, all right? Now, let's get into finally the actual program itself. Now, I'm going to cover, like I said, the 4-day version and the 2-day version. All right. Now, with the 4-day one, I'm going to show you 1 day, and the second 2-day version, I'm again also just show you 1 day. At most, that's what I'm going to show you, because again, it's not going to be fair to Jeff if I show anything more than that, but you'll still have plenty of understanding of the program itself. Now, no matter which version you select, they're all 12 weeks long, broken up into 3 phases, okay, 4 weeks long each. Now, each phase doesn't drastically change. Really, the only thing that changes is the exercises that you're going to be doing, all right? The overall structure pretty much stays the same. There's a few different changes in terms of the exercise order that might change from phase to phase, but the overall structure principles pretty much does stay the same. Now, having said that, and Jeff mentions this, do you have to change the exercises when you go into the next phase? No. You don't. You can stick with the same ones from the first phase, okay, and continue to make progress in those. Nothing wrong with that, okay? That's what I personally would do, because I feel like over just 4 weeks, I need a little bit more time than that to continue making progress on them. I don't want to drastically or all of a sudden just change into something else, okay? So at the very least, with the compound wounds, the ones at the beginning of the day, I would still pretty much keep the same, and if I did make any changes in exercise, it would be with the isolations later on in the training session. So when you get into that phase 2 or even phase 3, really those isolations are the ones that I would change. Okay, and one thing you would see here is that all he really does is take the 2 exercises in that option A or option B for the exercise substitutions and then swap them in for the main exercise when you get to that phase 2 or phase 3. That's all he really actually does. And he puts the ones you did in phase 1 into that options list. So you can see that you can actually just keep the same ones if you really needed to. All right? So very, very simple. Now, let's get into looking at day 1 here on the 4-day week. Now, depending on the version you get, you'll notice that the split itself is actually different. So the 2-day one, that's a full body one. So you do full body on both days. On the 3-day one, that's a little bit different. You're doing an upper lower full body day type of split. You're doing an upper lower on the 4-day one, and then on the 5th day version, you're doing an upper lower push pull legs type split. Okay? All good splits. Just see which ones that you, again, can consistently stick with, but you think you'll respond to the best as well, okay? Very, very important. So it really does come down to the actual individual. So now on this 4-day week version, all right, this is day 1, so it's an upper day, all right? You can see in the chart here, he gives you the exercise, the number of warm-up sets you should do, then the number of working sets, the number of reps. The load here is blank because you're putting in the load that you're using, and then the RP, and then the rest intervals. All right, so these are the main or the core parts of the program here, and then of course the 2 substitution options. You can do or you're going to exchange with, and then some basic notes what you should be trying to follow in that exercise. All right, so exercise 1 is a flat dumbbell press. So you have 2 to 3 warm-up sets. That's perfectly good. And then 1 working set. Now, like I mentioned here, is 1 working set enough? Yes. Yes, it is, because you're doing only 4 to 6 reps. And it seems like, is that really enough? Well, yes, because look at your RPE. If it's an RPE of 8 to 9, it's very high, okay? Now, one thing to mention here before I go any further, and Jeff talks about this a little bit here as well, okay? Do you need to actually train to failure? Well, the research overall essentially says no, okay? You can get just as good of effort, if not actually even a little bit better progress or response from just 2 or 3 reps shy of failure. Okay, 3 is getting a little low at that point, but the point is you don't need to actually go to true actual failure to get a very good stimulus or response. All right. Now, having said this, in this type of program, you need to be getting actually closer to failure. That research is based off of someone who's following a longer program, one that with a higher amount of volume overall. Okay, with this, you need to be pushing yourself, because otherwise you're not going to get that much effort out of it, and you're not going to get that much progress out of it, okay? Because again, a lot of times there's only just 1 working set, maybe 2, depending on that exercise, all right? So in this particular case, yes, get very close to failure or pretty much right at failure. One thing to mention here is that training to failure can be beneficial at some times, because then you can know what it's truly like to push yourself. A lot of people just don't train that hard in the gym. They just don't. They don't know what true failure actually is. What they might think is an RIR of 1 or 2, in reality is more like 4 or 5, okay? So this can give you a very good idea of what high intensity actually should be like, okay? So actually try it out, actually follow it to what the program recommends, okay? So immediately after this one, you're going into another working set of flat dumbbell bench, but again, it's a back-off one. So you're going to decrease the load overall because you need to be getting around 8 to 10 reps, but your RPE is at 9 to 10. So you're really taking this to failure. So again, your load, yes, is going to come down a little bit, but not that much. Not really that much, so it's still very high intensity. Then right after that is a lat pull down, perfectly fine right there. Seated dumbbell shoulder press, very good exercise right there. And then cable row followed by a superset of skull crushers and easy bar curl. So inherently perfectly fine. The volume, again, is exactly what it should be. You'll notice here on some of those isolation movements that there is a drop set. Okay, that's perfectly fine, because that is a great way to introduce a higher intensity type of technique to make sure you're getting as much out of these 2 working sets as possible, or even just 1 if that's what it's called for. All right, now one thing you'll notice here is that in those isolation movements, those are going at RPE of 9 to 10 first off. So you really are pretty much taking them right to failure, or very, very close to it, okay? Which is perfectly fine in this case. And then one thing you'll also notice is that the rest intervals, he does recommend one. Now, the research on this overall essentially states that rest intervals isn't as important as one might think. Okay, essentially resting until you really feel like you're ready to go again, when your breathing is back to normal, that you feel like you're ready to go again, that's perfectly fine. You can get perfectly good results from that versus shorter rest periods, okay? Now, having said that, he might here recommend shorter rest periods in some cases, simply because, again, you're trying to stick to that 45-minute window. You don't have a ton of time. You're trying to save some of that, okay? Now, again, if you feel like you have a little bit of time, you need to rest a little bit more, there's nothing wrong with that at all. You don't have to stick to these rest periods he recommends. He mentions this, he just still says, try to stick to them to the best that you can. All right, so this gives you an idea here of day 1 on the 4-day a week, 4-day a week version. Okay, so now let's go on to day 2. So in this program, okay, this is a full body type split. So both days are full body A and the full body B. All right, so it's going to, again, be a little bit different, but the overall principles essentially are still the same. All right, so on this one, it starts off again with flat dumbbell bench, one working set, followed by another one working set of a back off set, perfectly fine there. Then you're doing Romanian deadlifts, all right? So again, you're keeping the reps a little bit on the higher side, followed by definitely a higher RPE of 8 or 9, all right? Work as hard as you can. Then a lat pull down, followed by walking lunge. Now, this is one thing that I want to mention. He has one working set in the walking lunges, okay? In this particular case, I would add one more working set to it. I know it will add an extra minute or two onto this, okay? But I don't think there's anything inherently wrong in doing so. You're already doing 2 sets here for RDLs, so you're really hitting your posterior chain pretty hard. Why not do the same with your quads? Now, having said that, yes, the walking lunge at this point is around the middle of your workout, so you're gonna be fairly fatigued at this point, so I can kind of understand that. But if you feel like you really can push and you really want to get the most out of it, I would say probably add one more working set here. But that is just my opinion. If you just have the one working set, there's nothing wrong with it. You'll still get plenty of out of it, don't get me wrong. I just feel like it could be maybe a little bit more there. And then again, same thing, skull crushers, then lateral raises, and then calf raise, okay? So perfectly fine in this particular case, if you wanted to superset some of the stuff, so like the skull crushers with lateral raises, to save even a little bit more time, perfectly fine there. One thing to note here with supersets though is remember, there's not really much evidence to state that doing supersets leads to a greater hypertrophic response, okay? There's some claims of this, but the evidence isn't very strong on that. The only thing that's strong on the evidence is that you're able to save time, all right? Is there some there about work capacity or increasing your work capacity by doing supersets or decreasing your rest periods? Maybe, okay? But at the end of the day, is it really that vital or that important? In this particular context, no, not really. So don't really worry about that sort of thing. That's really more important towards athletics anyway. So that gives you guys an idea here overall of how the program is laid out and how it looks. One or two changes here or there that I personally would make, but nothing drastic or anything like that. I think it's done very, very well, exactly the way that Essentials or shorter version of a program should be, okay? Concentrating not so much on that volume, but instead the intensity. Getting as much out of each set and each rep as you possibly can, okay? Now, having said that, yes, and intensity is important, but your technique still needs to be intact with every exercise that you do, okay? Even up to that very last rep. Otherwise, it's not going to serve as much of a purpose as it needs to or should be. Not to say that you can't attempt one more, okay? That's perfectly fine, and if you fail, fine. But don't do it for the sake of cheating, thinking that you're going to get some to stimulus by intentionally failing on the next one or something like that, okay? That's just going to set you up for injury at that point, all right? So just be careful with that. All right, so guys, that gives you an overall idea here. What I think, my final score, I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10, okay? Very close to an excellent, truly excellent program, okay? I just think that exercise substitution, huge step in the right direction, but one or two things left out of it, and then also one or two tiny changes I would make in the programming. Personally, that's just me. Not so much taking a point off for that, but that's just, you know, again, another personal detail. So that is my thoughts on Jeff's latest program, his Essentials program. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Plenty more stuff to come very soon. I'm gonna try and get my act together. We'll see. I don't know, who knows. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon.